Welcome to the first episode of Screenworthy, the podcast about everything that is and should be on screen, brought to you by The Mind Refinery. I am your host, Kyle Bodanis. This week we're talking about The Five Bloods, the latest joint from the man himself, Spike Lee. If you're not already subscribing to the Mind Refinery podcast channel or following us on YouTube or social media, we highly recommend it. Don't forget to give us a good rating while you're at it. Now, here's the show. Hey guys, here with me to discuss Spike Lee's latest joint is the incomparable Coburn Blair.
Hi, how's it going?
And making his first appearance on the pod, talented filmmaker and producer, Neil Owusu.
Hey.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. So, Spike Lee, he does another war film. I think this one is totally very different from his previous, which we will get into. What were our initial reactions to this film?
Coburn, you want to go or what's up?
I'll let you lead off.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was apprehensive at first a little bit. I know, Spike Lee, even though I love him and I will probably tattoo him on my shoulder if I could, just because I'm a pretty diehard fan of his work. There is still sometimes a bit of touch and go with his work. So I was apprehensive, but when I saw it, I was pretty blown away. Like in terms of the overall pacing of the film, the back and forth with the character stories from a time point of view, how it looks, and yeah, just overall like the impression that it left.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like, I think coming off of Black Klansman, which I loved, and I thought it was quite the return to form from Spike Lee, like just at least compared to Chirac, I think it was 2014 or something like that. So I think he was kind of getting back on track, and I knew, like, obviously the cast. I was really excited for Jonathan Majors. I'd just seen Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Yeah, such a great film.
This is a great film. That's the only one I've seen of him, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I saw that and White Boy Rick too. So kind of coming off those things, and I was really excited for his performance. So I think it lived up to that. Initially, I thought like maybe it's a little bit long. Like I think there were certain points in the movie that could have been maybe shorter.
Like cutting, yeah.
Yeah, but initially I really liked the movie.
Yeah, I thought definitely that the length was one of the problematic things with it. But overall, I mean, anytime you're with Spike Lee, and I mean this in the best way possible, he's like cinema and PBS combined, and like it gives me like, but it's like I'll go to bat for public television any day, and it's like there's always like teachable moments in it, and I really enjoyed just how he was able to kind of get into the Black experience in Vietnam and do it in a way that was interesting, playing with the different aspect ratios, and really putting together a cast that was able to kind of live up to the work, and also not be completely tone deaf for the Vietnamese ideas associated.
Yeah,
with
I
the war.
like that.
Yeah,
I love that it was a balanced sort of perspective.
Yeah, and when he shows, and I forget the name, but the Vietnamese woman on the radio, it's
Hanoi.
Hanoi Helen, is it?
I think it's
Hannah.
Yeah.
Hannah. It's Hanoi Hannah. I like how, because that, I mean, was obviously taken. That is the Viet Cong understood what, like, there was more. The black soldiers in Vietnam War had more, kind of in relation to what the Vietnamese were experiencing, right? And I think that the Vietnamese intelligence was smart enough to understand that. Black soldiers weren't, and black people in America, especially at that time, were like, they were fighting for a country that didn't love them back, and it's very. You really see the scope of the enemy's knowledge of them with that, right? And how they're speaking directly to them. Yeah. And I really thought that was a kind of a really cool nuance that Spike Lee dropped in, but at the same time never damned what they're doing at the same time. It's like this weird, like they were giving their lives to their country, as you know, as they had said, Black people had always done, since the Revolutionary War, and then they were just kind of contextualizing this versus what the civil rights situation was in the United States, and I thought it was just very, very well done. And as I said with the PBS thing, it's like I get a warm feeling every time I watch a Spike Lee movie. Like even if it gets rough, but it just is in my wheelhouse. I feel like I'm always watching something important, with some exceptions, to because he obviously has had missteps and such. But I think this is honestly one of his best movies, and I thought he did fantastic with it.
I think the use of archival footage to set the tone and to contextualize everything, like just the kind of nonstop onslaught to set up the time period, the era. I thought having Muhammad Ali was important there because he was a very prominent, outspoken critic, like Kwame Ture, and everyone else he had there to set it up. And I think also like having Hanoi Hannah, who was a real person at the time, also calls back to his use of Axis Sally in Miracle at St. Anna, who was like,
good call.
German propaganda of the same thing. And the use of propaganda by the US's enemies was really effective because what they were saying was essentially true. Like it wasn't really conflicting propaganda. They were playing music that was from the time period, and it spoke directly to the soldiers in a way that like the US couldn't really claim to do because they didn't care about the soldiers as much as like they were kind of cannon fodder at that point.
They were being drafted by an imperialist, They were being drafted by an imperialist power. It's really interesting how he put it together. I really like that.
Yeah, I think, the one thing I enjoyed, apart from the historical context, is Spike Lee's films, his soundtracks. Terrence Blanchard, I think he uses them at least 90% of the films that he makes, but it has a very distinct Spike Lee sound. Like I was watching, When the Levees Broke just recently, and I go back to that film like maybe once a year just because of how well it's done. It's a documentary, but still there is just that connection that you feel. There is almost a reflection because of the score. Like you're watching this film, you're watching this action film, but because of like the slow sort of deep jazz accents, you're reflecting even in a high-paced action film.
Oh no, I was gonna say, yeah, like I think his use of like Marvin Gaye, and like if you look at the soundtrack to this movie, like it has a lot of same songs that, like, for me at least, my favorite movie of Spike Lee when I was a kid was Crooklyn, and like kind of the connections of having Delroy Lindo in both, and then the soundtrack, it matches up. There's like the use of like the Chamber Brothers' "Time's Gonna Come," or like. But the way they use Marvin in this film, I think, was like something of its own. Like the stripped down vocals and matching the scenes, I thought was just so powerful and like added a whole like different layer to the movie.
The use of work from What's Going On was awesome. Like when they did Inner City Blues, like when they used like that, like first of all, that record, if there was an anti-war record that really encapsulated, the want for peace and the kind of contradiction from having Black people go out and fight for a country that doesn't care about them back. That was the Marvin Gaye sunk into with that record, and I thought that was a great compliment to what was going on. It was a great use for the soundtrack, and also like the a cappella, when they had that a cappella part where they were just using the lyrics. It was just really good. I think the way he does soundtracks are really good. It's really good. I don't think he uses score in a manipulative way either, which is super important, because it's like it's gotta, with the way he uses it, it's like it creeps up on you where you start feeling these emotions bubbling up inside of you, but your brain isn't connected to them, and then you just realize it's like, wow, that's being put together with really well done horns. You know what I mean? And as I said, those jazz accents, in the music.
Yeah, I think it's like everything, even with Miracle St. Anna, I believe Terrence Blanchard was the composer on that as well.
Yep.
But there's such a such a like a juxtaposition of like jazz and like, oh, okay, this is a war film, and it's almost, it confuses you at first, but I mean, if you're used to Spike Lee, you know, like there's a deep jazz cut in it, but it was nice to see even in the Vietnam context.
Well, that's an interesting point because, it's there's he's using music that is very, I mean, it's very quintessential film score rooted in classicism, but then, and it almost, especially used in a war film, that kind of music almost feels patriotic. But when he's
Hmm.
adding those jazz feelings, he's adding those minor tones and notes in there. So it's like there's a little bit of dissonance in it. So, and I think that he's able to do that really effectively and blend styles, but
Yeah.
also stay rooted well. Like listening to his soundtracks and stuff. Like, I mean, it's like listening to the history of black music in the 20th century, which is the history of popular music in the 20th century. So, like, I mean, there's another one of those things. That's why I say it's like PBS, because it's like it's a mood and a feel I get when I'm watching something important, and he bolsters that, and he just pulls at those heartstrings enough. So as I said, you don't notice them, but it like really helps combine with the performances. It's all the elements working together. And I thought that was one thing that was really good with this film, because like with the aspect ratios, with the music, with the soundtrack, with the performances, with the historical context that was added to the film, it was really kind of bringing everything together in a very succinct way. So I think that was one of the biggest things for it. But what was our favorite moments from this flick?
I think for me, like I love the change in aspect ratio when they go to the past. I also like that he didn't use de aging. I know there's some kind of controversy about him talking about like
Yeah.
maybe not having the budget for it, but I think it works well to kind of show how these characters are trapped in their own memories and how they're experiencing time and PTSD and all these kind of other factors that have been kind of chained in the moment. So I think when you see like how Stormer Norman is killed by Delroy Lindo's character Paul, I thought that was really powerful because it speaks to like how haunted Paul is throughout the film and how much he's kind of stuck in this moment and how kind of everything he does up until this point is because of that moment in the past, and he's kind of living with that.
I think for me, like the aspect ratio for sure is something that I think worked really, really well. I think at first it may have, like, I may have noticed it. I don't know if it would have explicitly taken me out of the film, but I noticed it. But then it became a quick trigger for you to know, oh, this is going to be a flashback. This is a sequence, and it was nice to, and I know like in other films, it's done by different ways, whether it's slowing down of the frame rate, color, etc. But I think just that quick like crop was like a quick indication of, okay, this is a flashback sequence. And then on the point of the de-aging, I like Coburn, I know I heard of the same controversy around that as well. For me, I don't know. I sit between not de-aging, but would it have made sense to get a younger cast for those scenes? Because I understand why he didn't, but they're not all the sequences, the flashback sequences, but there are certain sequences where I'm like, oh, y'all old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but I also understand, to keep your connection with the character consistently throughout the film, it made sense to use those characters. So I'm not to say that I'm in the same mind space as the talented Spike Lee, but I can see maybe he having sort of a back and forth in terms of what makes the most sense.
I think the fear is because what you just said, like with how they look old, especially it's when they're doing action stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
like I mean, like when they're firing a gun. Like I'm of two minds of it. Like I went to the theater and saw The Irishman, and the scene where
Okay.
Robert De Niro is beating that guy in the wide shot is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen. Like because the faces don't match the actors' movements.
No.
right? So it's like you're looking at a guy who's been de-aged to look like he's 20, like 30, 25 or 30, but then he's moving around like an old man who's got obviously a hip problem. So it's like, how do
Yeah.
you, so like that's the problem for me with the de-aging, is that like I don't think the technology is there, or at least
Oh,
like,
I completely agree with the like
yeah,
non-de-aging. Like I think we would have ran into
yeah,
that same sort of like it's the uncanny valley, right?
yeah, 100%.
Of it's like, wait, this is not right. Like it's close, but it's not right.
And sometimes things that are closer to being right are almost worse, because like
Yeah.
I think with this is it added a surreal element to it, as if it
Hmm.
was almost like it added a very dreamy like idea to it, because it's like they're young, and then Chadwick Boseman, who in his limited time is fantastic. The guy is
Yeah.
fantastic, is super talented. um in his limited time on screen, it's like it's very like these old guys with their buddy who died, and it's kind of funny because he never aged, so it kind of shows that because he died, and then it just shows these old guys who, like Coburn said, with the whole, they have been living haunted by it. I mean, my favorite time, well, when friggin' Lester Freeman himself walked on screen, Clark Peters, I was very happy because this guy's following the money again. This guy's following the money in The Wire. Now he's
Yeah.
following the money in the jungle. I love it.
Yeah.
He's fucking so good. And then Isaiah Whitlock, shit himself.
Yeah, we got a sheet scene, which I was like,
Shit.
I feel like
Like,
you can't put him in a movie and not put him in
they so like elongated it, and it was so perfect. Like everyone watching it knew what it was, and it
yeah.
was just a great nod to the character.
Yeah, and I mean, Jonathan, like, I really thought that especially, the four friends, and Jonathan Majors coming in was like really, 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 really good. I thought they had great chemistry. I thought it was fun at times, but it's also real. It showed that they all have the same problem essentially, but went different ways. Like one guy squandering his fortune, one guy like
Hmm.
losing himself. Delroy Lindo's character Clark Peters is like outside addiction. Isaiah Whitlock, like he's the only one who seemed kinda somewhat together, but like they all like this is the thing. It's trauma. And I'm glad that they acknowledged some self actualization about like among the characters, that they understood they had trauma, because it kind of would have been
Right.
like if you had characters at this time with all we know now about PTSD, kind of just not acknowledging it. You know what I mean? And then Delroy Lindo, every time he was on screen, especially when he broke away from them, and he started to like almost break the fourth wall.
Oh my God,
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
We gotta have a conversation about the monologue, like
yeah,
Yeah.
because
He was just chewing up scenery all like anytime he's on screen.
he was great, man. Every moment was economic, as economic as a monologue can be. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It was really good. So like let's look a little bit about performances. I guess Delroy Lindo is a fucking great place to start. Um, in my opinion, I can't see him not getting nominated for at
I
least a
like
fucking Golden Globe.
I think he's a really underutilized actor. Like even like if you look him up on IMDb, like I don't think the quality of acting that he's kind of given over the years doesn't really match his status. Like I don't think he's used that often by directors.
yeah, like it's so funny. Like he's a character actor, right? Like, and I think there's always that weird thing of like the character actor transitioning to a legitimate, not that's poor use of words, to like a lead, a focused, everyone putting the energy behind. And I think he's a character from his acting chops from when I was young, because that's what I want to say. Like I grew up with Delroy. Like in films, where he was like playing like a badass gangster in Malcolm X, like him playing a father figure in Romeo Must Die, like a range of different characters. Like him, and it's for me it's great to see him in a role like this, because I honestly feel like this is his movie. Like this is his Like everyone else was great in it, but this feels like his vehicle, and I would be shocked if he doesn't get the accolades that like he's deserving of.
I feel like Spike Lee's the only one who utilizes him properly, to be honest with you. Because,
Yeah.
and you see, here's the thing with Delroy Lindo. He's like a utility infielder. You could pop him anywhere, and he's going to
Yeah.
be good, right? Like, he's good. Like, this guy's like conservatory theater education, too. So, like, he's been, he has more than the chops to do this. And, like, it's funny, because I completely forgot about the Romeo Must Die thing, but
Yeah.
it's, I
I
completely
watched
forgot.
the core the other night, and I was like, oh, I forgot he was in the core.
Oh,
He's like
yeah, he was in the core.
Oh, true.
That fucking Aaron Eckhart movie? Is that
Yeah,
what it? Yeah.
I think so.
Where it's like
He's
space
like
in the middle of the fucking earth?
he's like I feel like his playbook is out of Samuel L. Jackson's playbook, where like he's like used in so many different like he has so many different roles. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson, I think last year or 2 years ago, was like the highest paid just because of the amount of films he was, something around that metric. And it's just like he is consistently working, but he doesn't have the acclaim like a Samuel L. Jackson does.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah. I think the thing is that Samuel L. Jackson's been in huge blockbusters is the
Right.
big thing, and also like films like Snakes on a Plane, where it gains its own level of
Yeah.
notoriety. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's a little bit like there's a I'm not a Samuel L. Jackson's a talented actor, but there is still a level of kind of novelty with his performances, right? Where
Mm.
he has tropes that he kind of falls into, despite being a fucking super talented actor. But like Lindo, I mean, like just the range of performances, like Clockers,
Yeah,
like
Mm.
he is savage in Clockers, and same thing with in Malcolm X too. Like in Malcolm X, it's like, but then you see him dying at the end of Malcolm X, and it's just the ability to go from someone who is powerful in the streets to this frail old man. It says just his ability to convey that idea is just says a lot about like how he's trying to portray mortality and all these things. And I just thought it was really good, and I completely agree that he's underutilized because listen, we live at the end of the day, we live in a world where it's like, what are you doing at the box office? And think that's why one, I like filmmakers like Spike Lee, because they don't give a fuck, and like independent film, because this is he's an important actor. And I think if we're looking at show me your Delroy Lindo reel, this is the primary thing. I'm probably going to show you bits and
Hmm.
pieces of the monologue where he's like, this is one of those on the tombstone films, in my opinion, for him.
This is the vehicle, I think.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm hoping that this kind of like you said, like kind of like being a vehicle for him gets him kind of more roles and more prominent features, or at least like placed in. So I could see this guy doing like prestige dramas on HBO or whatever. Like there's so many like ways that he could be like more utilized, or like roles for him, especially like
I think
as
that's a good idea, though. I
moment.
think the idea of him in in series, because listen, when you're going through, you want someone who can really sink their teeth into a character when it comes to, especially like prime TV. You know what I mean? High end TV like HBO, Netflix, that kind of thing. And I think he's someone who gets utilized for it, because look at it like this: Steve Buscemi wasn't starring in shit, and then he was
Yeah,
in Boardwalk Empires, and he was fantastic.
Yeah,
yeah,
it completely changed, and it can completely change his sort of like character brand.
Yeah, it recontextualized it, and
Mm.
I think that like he's the guy with crazy eyes in Adam Sandler movies, and then all of a sudden
Hmm.
it's like he's doing this, and I think that I'm hoping this is kind of the same thing for him. You know what I mean? Like he's 67, he's still got good acting years left. He's experienced, he's talented, and he puts himself into it. What about other? Well, first of all, you know what? I want to ask a question. Is this our favorite Delroy Lindo performance? Just to put a bow on it.
Who?
Mm.
I probably would have to go back to Malcolm X, but that's also could be because I've seen that more recently than Clockers. I probably
Yeah.
haven't seen Clockers in maybe like 6-7 years. But Malcolm X like comes to mind before this. But for me, like Crooklyn is like holds a special place, especially because he's playing like an analog to Spike Lee's father in that movie, and like it's
Mm.
kind of Spike Lee's kind of like biopic, kind of about his kind of childhood and upbringing. And I loved the father figure role he plays in Crooklyn with Spike.
Yeah, I go between this and Malcolm X for sure. I think it would have to be this sort of comes in first, just slightly by the nose. But I also think it's because of nostalgia. It's like Corbin saying, like I think it's like, I mean, how many times have I watched Malcolm X? I couldn't tell you. And how much is it so synced in my DNA? So I think that's what plays a role. But like you were saying, this is like what would be on his tombstone. I think this is his calling card. So based on that alone, I think this would be the choice for me.
What are our thoughts on some of the other performances? Jonathan, let's start with Jonathan Majors.
I thought Jonathan Majors did a fantastic job of holding his own and like kind of playing, a supporting actor to Delroy and to Delroy's kind of like hauntedness, his like extreme PTSD, and like like he was the calming force, like when he would freak out or whatever, and like that scene with him on the landmine, and he's kind of like looking with like so much fear in his eyes, and he's like kind of reconnecting with his dad through this whole trip, and he just shows up. And I just thought he did a fantastic job, like even from like the scene in the hotel room when he's like, "Oh, you can't come with us," and he kind of just fits in with the cast, and like he's the young guy in a room full of really experienced and really talented actors, but he never felt off-putting or he didn't belong on screen with any of them.
I completely agree. I think it was such a pleasure seeing him. I don't know if I went in knowing that he was in the film. So I think when he came on screen for me, I was like, Last Man from San Francisco. So it was nice to see him, and then yeah, he completely kept up. And I think he made a nice connection between the different generations. Like you have the older generation, but then like as the viewer, I guess we kind of almost lived through him. So yeah, it was a nice addition.
When I found out he was cast, I assumed that he was going to be playing a younger version of.
Oh right.
I thought it was going to be him and Chadwick playing like the younger versions of him. So I was really surprised to see the way they included him.
And he wasn't the first choice, eh? He was. So what happened was there was original casting ideas. Like for example, ironically, it was supposed to be Samuel L. Jackson, Giancarlo Esposito, Don Cheadle as part of the original groups.
Interesting.
And then John David Washington was who is so fucking good.
Yeah.
True. Okay.
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Yeah, so like that was the because I mean he's gonna roll with him after BlacKkKlansman, right?
Yeah.
And rightly so. But I think what happened was he may have got tied up in Tenet. I think was at the same time. So Giancarlo Esposito, Samuel L. Jackson sounds great. Sometimes these things in Hollywood lore work out, and I think this is an example of this because I mean I think Washington would have been fantastic. He's talented, obviously has the pedigree, but Jonathan Majors, I think it's like he's less known in the in the wider film pantheon, right at this moment, and I really hope this leads to kind of more because like I like how Washington is an example. He was, he's kind of becoming the man of the hour right now. And I think that as, attitudes fucking change in Hollywood and realizing that there's some like excessively talented black actors who should get more opportunities. I hope actors like Jonathan Majors are part of that because, you get to, because there's so many underutilized talents and we have so many bad movies come out with fucking bad acting.
I think with like Lovecraft Country, like I think this is a good way to kind of get him in sort of people's eyes. But I'm very also excited to see what happens with Lovecraft because that's his vehicle too.
Yeah,
I feel like this is like, I feel like this is like, this is Delroy. All right, do your thing. And he played a great role. But for Lovecraft, I feel like we're gonna see him because I think that's an HBO series, right? So
yeah, I think it comes
it's
out
going to be So I think the continuous of us seeing him in a role over a period of time. I think people are going to see his magic.
I think that's a good point because if I'm trying to remember the name of the gentleman from The Night of on HBO.
Riz Ahmed.
Yes, Rise of Men. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought that series, which was fantastic, really kind of put him in the spotlight, and people kind of,
Hmm.
it was a good vehicle for his talent. So I think Lovecraft, especially because HBO is doing it too, so it's going to be well done.
And you have
Uh,
Jordan Peele as well, who's
exactly.
also
It's
really
Jordan
hot right
Peele,
now.
and Jordan Peele, like even down to like his friggin' Twilight Zone, like his stuff is good, right? And that's on a friggin' network, and it's fucking good, right? Like it's not HBO, and he made it good. So I think everything is there for him to succeed in that, and hopefully that is the case. I felt that the other, like some of the the actors in the wire, Clark Peters, Isaiah Whitlock, I thought the chemistry with them, with the larger group, was really good, and there was like enough balance between the playfulness between them of like old friends, because I mean, like, familiarity breeds contempt, and then also it creates a bond, and I think they were able to show the contradictions and duality of that in their relationships. So I mean, how did you feel about those performances?
Yeah, well, I think like obviously you have Isaiah Whitlock Jr. and Clark Peters have known each other for decades, like going back to The Wire. So I think like having them in it together as like a duo, and I think like you had Clark Peters kind of narrating and carrying the story for a lot of it. Also, I would say he's another like underutilized actor who I don't see like
Yeah.
pop up too much, and like I don't see him in many roles. He was on HBO show recently, but another guy that you don't see too often. So like when you do see him, like
Was it that fantasy show?
yeah,
Yeah.
the Philip Pullman series, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like you get these. I don't know if you've watched The Wire, you see The Wire actors pop up, and a lot of them you're like, oh, finally, I get to see you again. Other ones, have gone on to bigger careers and more like mainstream success. But I think he was really, really powerful in it. I like that addition of Chadwick because of Chadwick kind of playing like Black Panther and playing like these kind of
Mm.
big hero roles, and then you transition him into this, and like in their minds, he's mythologized as a hero as well. So it kind of adds to his like kind of off-screen persona, like bleeds onto the screen. So I thought
Yeah.
that was super important.
I think all as a composition, as a unit, I think the older men was like their chemistry all together really worked. I did feel like some of the like tertiary cast, I think they were brought in maybe just to fill their necessary roles just to move the story, like the white folks that were stopping the mine. I think they did what they needed to do, but there was almost such a great performance between the main characters that the secondary characters, they did feel like just like set pieces, or not set pieces, but just like pieces to move the story across.
Yeah, I think as soon as you introduce them and you say they're clearing mines out, like that one of the characters is going to step on a mine. And even though that scene was really tense, it just seemed kind of like it was really easily set up. Like it was
Yeah.
like we earlier we know that there's people hunting for mines, and now he's going to back up into a mine.
Yeah, they're like randomly in a forest. Oh, okay, there's definitely going to be an obstacle with the mine
Yeah,
at some point.
there's too much of a Chekhov's gun in that situation when they show up, and it's like,
Yeah.
we supply mines. Like that's the only thing I was like immediately like, these motherfuckers are stepping on mines later. Like that is definitely gonna happen. I'm predicting it. I thought the same. I didn't think that they were. You know what it is? It's just that these guys could have died in the shootout at the end. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like you could have taken out that whole scene, and then there was like the weird pseudo like sexual tension between Jonathan Major's
Yes.
characters and like
Yes.
Melanie Thierry's fucking. The only one who I liked is Jean Reno,
yeah, I like
um,
John Reno too.
because like he's just good no matter what. Like he's good in fucking everything.
Yeah,
So like he's like a French Delroy Lindo in that respect, where like you can pop him somewhere, and even if the movie's bad,
Oh yeah, Jean Reno.
he's gonna
Yeah.
end up being good. The professional himself.
well,
Yes.
So he's not walking around with a 13-year-old girl. That's good to see. Um, so I know, and I felt the same way. And I know, to your point about the way Chadwick Boseman's character was kind of idolized and mythologized. I mean, I loved that. Like I thought that was,
Yeah.
and it's like he's like this. It's like he's more of a symbol than a character. A symbol of what they aspire to be. They aspire to be, like strong black men in a world where it's difficult to be that.
yeah,
And
because you
and
have him
he,
as like what the captain or something like that. And like you
yeah,
said, like many, and like they
Yeah.
compare him. They're like, oh, he was our Malcolm and our Martin. So they like it's like very ingrained in this within the mythology of the story.
I honestly think that was like the best performance I've ever seen him do. To be honest, I know it's very small, but I mean, I'm a fan of Chadwick, but I was also watching like 42 and Little Richard? No, the James Brown biopic where he wasn't, he wasn't the standout actor. I mean, he's a handsome man playing a role suited for him, biopic-ish. I mean, you could even make that same argument in Black Panther, where I mean, you're not expecting Oscar-winning performances, but he played the role of just, being that sort of blockbuster figure. Whereas even in the short time with this role, like you really see like range, and that was exciting to see.
He's very good. Like, he's quite good.
Yeah, I would definitely say the same thing. I think like I saw 21 Bridges recently, which I liked, but I think like in a lot of movies he's either doing like this like faux African accent, or
which is honestly like not. I love Black Panther, but that I mean as an African individual,
yeah,
like there was moments where it was tough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like a little like. It's enjoyable for what it is, but you're kind of like, eh. Like,
so how off was his accent that? Because like I'm the son of an Englishman, so if I can hear a bad British accent in 2 seconds, so like what was it? So how far off? Totally far off? Good attempt? How was it?
I mean, I mean, I'll say it was a good attempt. I think it was like not so far off that I'm like, I cannot sit through this. But I also don't think it was so good that it was like considered good acting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. Like,
it totally does. It totally does.
Yeah. I feel like if someone is like, oh yeah, that's an okay accent. All right, like I'll buy it.
It's adequate.
Yes.
Okay.
I have trouble like how he got roped into doing it, because he does like one of like Gods of Egypt, and then he's also in this another movie I saw on Netflix called like Message from the King, where he plays this like.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, like like why don't you cast like African actors for some of these?
He has a Nigerian look though. I'm not like I feel like if you were to tell me he's from Nigeria, I'd be like, okay, bet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even when I heard the accent, I almost want to be like, yo, just look deeper. There.
Yeah.
Did we? But I think he's just straight up American though.
Did we need more Chadwick Boseman in this movie, or was this just enough?
I think it was a perfect amount.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, man. Sometimes it's just like a Dion Waiters situation where he comes in, pops like 12 points, and you're fucking good, and that's all you need, right? So,
and I think it's more of the story versus him.
Yes.
I think even if he was even more amazing, like the story wouldn't make sense.
I think that there is a argument for being sparing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like leave them wanting more. I feel this way about like Heath Ledger in Dark Knight, whereas I want him to be on screen all the time. And but that
R.I.P.
Yeah, that want of them being on screen is good, because it means that they've done something right, and they're not like, you're not just like, get the fuck out of here. So I want to talk about, we talked a little bit about the chemistry, the cinematography in terms of how it was shot. I mean, we talked about the aspect ratios. Like, how were you guys with that? Did you thought that I thought they transitioned that pretty smoothly.
I love the colors.
Yeah.
In general, and it's, I guess specifically even in the transitions, I think it looks 16 millimeter, but it could have been all like done after the fact in post. But from 16 millimeter to whatever the definition was, I think it works seamlessly because of the pairing in colors. I think the overall cinematography was fantastic. I love the palette. For Vietnam, for me, like it was done respectfully. It didn't go the green approach, or is it yellow, for areas of poor countries. That's become very common. It was done really well, and I think it was shot really well.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed, like, there's some shots that like really stood out to me. I think, the shot of them kind of like doing this like almost Soul Train line in the club. and you
The
like put the
doll, the
camera on the
dolly,
dolly. Yeah,
the
and
classic Spike Lee dolly.
I was waiting for the actual dolly shot that happens like towards the end of the film, like right at the end of the film. But like I enjoyed that dolly shot, like of following through and like the kind of color palette in like the washed outness of the neon. The cinematographer also like worked on Drive, I saw, and I don't know if he's worked with
Oh,
Spike
true.
Lee before though.
Yeah, he's worked with Spike Lee before. Newton Thomas Siegel.
Yeah,
He's he's a great cinematographer. Drive looks incredible. That's funny you mentioned that.
yeah,
It's fucking fantastic. They had to argue to do this on 16 mil because Netflix was kind of like, you're shooting in Vietnam and there's nowhere to process that film, so you literally have to
Mm,
send the rushes home to be processed because they don't have the processing facilities. And then also, I mean, 35 you can swing, but and also the film, like it's a high grain film stock, so they were just like trying to find it was also
yeah.
difficult. So I mean, like, I'm always excited when filmmakers are trying to do that. They're trying to, they're sticking to their guns about things, and shooting on 16 millimeter could be an albatross, but they made it work. And your comment, Neil, about just the color palette and not using more of like a sepia tone or
Yeah.
for, like an impoverished country. Like Vietnam is a beautiful country, regardless of what has happened there, right? A
Mhm.
beautiful country filled with beautiful people. And I like the idea that there was like still a visual romance with it, especially in the cities.
Right.
And I mean, it was still, I think even compared to some other Spike Lee movies, very lush, especially his earlier works, right? Where his films, I feel, definitely had a little bit more of like, well, not a little bit, like a distinctively more gritty tone to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the most I've seen him like really push his colors.
Mm.
Yeah, there's I wouldn't say a complete wash in his films, but there is some sort like a consistent, very consistent palette that he uses.
Yeah, they're meant to look rugged.
Uh, yeah, yeah, but with this one, you're like, oh, okay.
Well, it's
Um,
very pretty. Like when they show, the especially when they're going through the jungle and it goes to the full res, to the full screen. Like
mhm.
these vistas are look out, like it's very very well shot. It looks fucking great, and I love the little nods to Apocalypse Now that they're dropping in there as well. In the shooting, like, because the club's name is Apocalypse Now, and when they're going down the river, they show it snaking through the boat, snaking through the river. They have Ride of the Valkyries playing, and then they try to shoot it when it's the full screen in more of that cinemascope style. And I love the subtle nods. I love that they did that with it. Like, that's another thing about Spike Lee and the way he shoots these films. With the cinematographers, is that it's like a it's one thing I think he's taken really well from Martin Scorsese, is that it's almost like a film lesson as you're going through it. Little nods to
Mhm.
things, to different filmmakers, going back even to the silent era with stuff. And I just think it goes back to my PBS fucking anecdote, and how it's like you're learning something. Like, Spike Lee films are the kinds that you're thrown in the fucking Library of Congress. Like, that's just straight up.
100%.
yeah. I think you get that with Spike, right? Like you get his love for film, for like a lot of different kinds of film. You get his like passion for like the genre, and like he's a movie maker to make movies, and like I think too with him, like not really ever being like a big studio director, like he's always kind of retained his art house style. And like even in films that are like the bigger budget films, like this is one of his biggest budget films, but like even in like an Inside Man, there's still nods and subtle references to like the techniques that he's come up using and he loves, and like these elements that kind of like always kind of lend themselves to his filmmaking.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's the poetry of him. I think his films are very poetic, and I think with this one probably the most, with a full on monologue, and I think he does it so well that I am not taken out of the experience. And I don't know how you manage to do that. Like a film that is, pseudo realistic, realistic premise. You're depicting characters in a realistic way, going to find gold that they happen to be lost, and all of a sudden there is a full-on one-man show that I think lasts for like 20 minutes or whatever, maybe not 20 minutes, but a good duration of time, and it all fits. And I think that's the difference between a Spike Lee war film and a David Fincher war film,
Mm.
or a Michael Mann war film, or Christopher Nolan war film. Like the the poetry, and still implementing that poetry that you don't feel like you're out of the experience, is something that like Spike Lee has just mastered.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned about the art house because like he do the right thing, School Days. She's got to have it. Like these are films that came up through the independent film scene, right? And that's what happened, and that becomes massive in the '90s. You know, this the Sundance generation, and I think his films are a massive influence on that. And I think one thing about this movie, and I think especially how it contrasts to Miracle Sing Anna, which was a movie I enjoyed, is
Yeah,
that
me too. Me too. Not a
this
lot of people did, but
listen, I think listen, at the end of the day, I think I don't know how well it was far more Hollywood. You know, I think it was more like this is more about characters and it's shot as such. The camera is right up in Delroy Lindo's face. You know what I mean? And that is a creative choice that I admire because it's filling the screen with the talent and letting the talent do the work,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's subtle movement in camera and that, and not flashy or anything, but it's like music. The notes you're not playing are just important as the ones you are playing, and I think that's kind of his mo for deciding how to choose camera positions and that kind of thing. Like I definitely think he definitely comes from a Gordon Willis school,
Hmm.
and and I think this was able to accomplish something in that it was. I feel like some of the camera techniques in Miracle Sand is, despite being a more Hollywood movie, just in the way it's executed, I felt that the attempt to make it look gritty was greater than this movie, but this film was infinitely more gritty
Hmm.
because they were able to do that in ways that are, because everyone can like shoot on a weird film stock or put a LUT on a camera to make it look extra grainy and stuff, but it's him, a combination of all the elements coming together, and that's how really you're defining the best filmmakers take all the elements and create a mood with all of them working together. It's
Yeah.
not just manipulative music. It's not just a shaky fucking handheld camera. It's all these elements working together, and I think that this is among his best shot films. For me, I'm like, for his best shot films, you're looking at. Um, I love Malcolm X and the way it's shot, especially the scene where they're all in the streets with Peter Boyle's character. Also though, I'm like with you guys where there's a bias because I've seen Malcolm X a million times, and
Yeah.
also I feel like Malcolm X hits a greater cultural note as well because like it's things like that have it's why Malcolm X will always be in people's minds. The Social Network will always be in people's minds because it like commands the zeitgeist of a particular feeling. Even with Malcolm X, he was talking about history. It was when it was put out and how it was put out, and the importance that people cast upon it, which it fucking rightfully deserves. It makes it stay in the consciousness a lot more.
Hmm.
Whereas like some of his and like other films that compare to that are Do the Right Thing, and I
Right.
think those are the films that are able to do that of his. I hope that this one does that too, but it's hard. I think though it's timely, and I think it was put out at fucking the exact right time, especially since there's no good movies coming out, and then this comes
Yeah.
out. It almost like gives you a reprieve from the nothingness.
Do you think the fact that it's a Netflix release will have like any like negative effects on it?
Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore. If you had asked me this 2 years ago, I'd say yes. I think that I think that Netflix now is, especially given what's going on with COVID, like
Yeah.
Netflix is fine. Like their
I think.
shootings their shooting is going to be interrupted, but their release methodology is intact.
Yeah, I think that was such a smart play. I think Ori. I mean, he would have been Christopher Nolan right now with Tenet. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah, yeah. Just wait. Just wait.
exactly. 100%.
Whereas like we're all experiencing, we're talking about it. It's something that, and it's something we can continuously rewatch. I definitely think there's certain films where even today, um I would, if it went on Netflix and I would be like, for that type of movie, maybe you should have went another route, like a more traditional route. But I think,
No, I think that's a good point.
yeah, but I think with Netflix, for you to really succeed in a premiere on Netflix, speaking from a non-expert, I think if you have notoriety going for you, people are going to run to your film.
Mm.
Makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, I mean, if so, like, I don't even need to. I might not even need to watch the trailer, but like the moment on the big splash page, Spike Lee joint, like I'm watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot more difficult when you're, a director starting out and you're looking for sort of that. You're trying to build that notoriety. Releasing a film on Netflix, not to say that it's wrong. You're gonna have a hard time getting eyes on it.
Yeah, like I think your point, like for example, if Tenet came out on Netflix, that's not going to work out. It's just not.
Yeah,
You're going to have to make.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that is the counter to my point, and I completely agree with that. I think for Spike Lee, Netflix is perfect because
oh,
one,
perfect.
Netflix leaves you the fuck alone. Like when you go with like Netflix doesn't sign someone like Spike Lee, and people don't flock to Netflix just because they have cash. They have cash, but also because like they kind of want people to come in with the work done. So if you're
Yeah,
someone at Spike Lee's level, you're coming in with you have your infrastructure, you have all these things, and it works out. And also, Spike Lee's the kind of filmmaker who is mainstream, but he's not really, really, really mainstream. You know what I mean? So if
yeah,
someone wants to sample his work, like if School Days or She's Gotta Have It, like She's Gotta Have It was on Netflix, so someone isn't like people aren't going to go to the theater necessarily to go see it, or they may not have
yeah.
back in the day, but now you can introduce it to an entire generation who's raised on Netflix and chill, like
Absolutely. And
Yep.
it's like Tenet is a film where it's like, I mean, it can work on Netflix because it is this massive sort of roller coaster type experience, a little it's Tenet is one of those things where it's like the perfect a mesh of blockbuster, but also artistic merit. Like there you're gonna get a great story from it, because it's Christopher Nolan. But you need to experience it in the theater. It's not going to work at home.
yeah.
Kyle, what do you think of Irishman in theaters? Because I didn't end up seeing it in theater. I only saw it on Netflix.
Well, was a point I was just about to make. Like I sat during the theater, I was an idiot and smoked a joint before I went in.
Yeah.
And then like friggin' 2.5 hours into this shit, I'm like half asleep, and I'm like, when is this gonna end? And then all of a sudden, Action Bronson selling caskets, and I perked up a little bit. Only so I could turn to my friend and be like, "See, he sounds like Ghostface Killer." So this guy's biting. So like, it's it's one of those things where like, okay, I went to the movie theater to see it because I go out for Martin Scorsese. There's a few filmmakers I go out for every time.
Right.
Yeah.
Spike Lee's fucking one of them, and I go out for him. I went to it, and I'm like, this is the longest thing I've ever seen, and there was all these recommendations of ways to watch it as a 4-part series on Netflix. And I think that's genius because let's say you want to watch Defy Bloods, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't like, I got to make time in my schedule to go to a movie and all this shit and all
Yeah.
this. And you can just sit at home, have dinner simultaneously, hang out with your family simultaneously, and watch a friggin' awesome movie. And also, like, I think that, listen, I'm pro Netflix mostly, minus a few things that have to do with their relationship to the Canadian government in terms of the film industry and the Canadian Media Fund. But
Mhm.
generally, I think it's good for filmmakers because they're putting out a lot of content and they are driving other companies to develop a lot of content as well because they're the industry standard right now. And what that is good for creators. And so
Yeah.
I'm very pro the whole going the Netflix route. And like when you look at their business model, and I spent a lot of time studying their business model, the feature film part of it kind of scared me because feature film right now isn't a good business. That's why you have all these superhero movies coming out.
Mm.
And like the studios are so risk averse that like it's not the theatrical release isn't necessarily the route for groundbreaking films anymore. And does this movie get made? If Spike Lee, so maybe, but like even you have someone like Spielberg had to like argue for Lincoln to be made, right? Because it wasn't the normal Spielberg tentpole. So that I think that if you just rely on the mainstream
Yeah.
release of films, you're going to miss out on so much stuff. And the independent situation isn't like it was in the 90s right now. So it's like this is where we kind of go for it, if that makes any sense.
Do
Yeah, I
you
think so.
do you feel that, because I've been like, I may have not been like studying it like that in depth, but I've been observing how like it's almost like all the different avenues of filmmaking have been sort of morphing into whatever ultimately they're going to be. But like, if of course you got your Netflix, and then like feature films, like it's again so risk adverse that it's like, oh, if it's not a baked in win, I don't care. But then you have companies like A24 that, I mean, without seeing their numbers, seemingly like look like they found an approach
Hmm.
um, that they're able to. And this is a question, like it's like, because from the outset, it looks like A24 is building a brand, and they're able to build, and they're able to produce and distribute these great films. Like, have they found a winning approach, or is it a bubble that it's eventually going to collapse in on itself because um, there's not enough revenue generation for those type of films?
I think that A24 has a good business model and they're kind of able to make it work. It's just like how can you sustain that? Which is why, for example, with Netflix, I'm like, okay, they're putting all of this money into feature films. Some of them really suck, and they are in like they are not like Apple where they or like a fucking Amazon or anything like that where there is a massive non-film diverse infrastructure economically around them, right? So for example, if Apple decides to produce feature films and the feature films don't work out, there is a diverse method of
Yeah,
bringing in more revenue that can bolster
yeah,
the company. And with their sales for hardware and software, the film industry is just a drop in the bucket for them. For
yeah,
them, it's
yeah.
just their push for service based to move
Means to
towards,
an end.
yeah, it's just part of their push towards service-based industries, right? So but with
Mm.
Netflix, it's like a Cortez we burnt our ships situation. So we're in it and we're in it or dead. You know what I mean? Like we're either going to succeed and be at a high level, one or two, with maybe someone like HBO, and but if they don't succeed, it's over or they're bought out. So like I'm like they keep emptying money into feature films and like their subscription and like there's like it's not a lot of content, you know, like for them you like quality is important but you also do need quantity. So it's like if you don't start producing good movies, then you're losing $100 million a pop. It's a
Yeah.
like it's a dangerous way of operating, but they're getting talent in now, like really big talent in now, so that's good. How do you feel that this film tackled, the black experience in Vietnam, especially compared to like other movies?
Yeah, well, I think there's not a it's not a huge genre like the Black War film. Like, Spike Lee's made like two of the big Black War films. There's Red Tails, which is I think Spielberg some few
No,
years ago,
that's
George
George
or
Lucas.
Lucas.
it's
Yeah,
Lucas, George
yeah,
Lucas. And then
There's some
there's like
other
the Tuskegee
Tuskegee. Yeah.
Airman movie with Lawrence Fishburne back in like
yeah.
the
The HBO movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's not a lot kind of surrounding the genre, and I think this is one, and I think the way the archival footage is used to set the tone of like what was happening, back in the States at the same time as this like 10-year incursion into Vietnam, and kind of juxtaposing, the treatment at home and with, the imperialism that they're forcing on another country is super interesting. And then you have the same kind of thing in Miracle at St. Anna when you have, you know, showing the German POWs getting treated better than them, like, at the army base. So I know, I think like this is a super important story to tell. And like, there's been books about it and there's, other recollections of it. But I think it doesn't like super lay like heavy handed on like the Black War experience in this film because it's like a story about other things. But I think having that as a backdrop is important.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I think it doesn't like, and not in a negative way per se, but it's not driving that home. I think there's accents of it, and I think like they speak about it and I think it ties in the overall experience with being Black in America. But I would love to see more films that highlight the very specific experience um, of, of of Black soldiers, especially in Vietnam. I think Dead Presidents did that a little bit. I don't know if you guys are familiar.
Oh yeah, it's such
Oh
a
yeah,
good movie.
seen.
Yeah. Where even though the film wasn't necessarily a Vietnam film, it's almost the climax that it got to, or the character's motivations was based on the experience of being Black in Vietnam. And I think the difference between Dead Presidents is it leaned more into drama, it leaned more into action drama, whereas I think if you try to do that too much with this film, it takes away from, I guess, the surface level, because it's hard to really put this film in genre, like in a genre. Like for me, it's like there's an element that it's very serious. There's a protest element to it, but there's also a fun ride up until the climax, where they're trying to get money, and like they have the one last sort of like Alamo type
Well, it's like the dirty.
battle
It's like the
at the
Dirty
end.
Dozen. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Kelly's Heroes.
Exactly. So it's like, are they going to succeed against the one with all the odds against them? So there's that element where I don't think it would have fared too well with going like directly into that topic. But I would love to see more films do that though.
I like the idea of it using that as a backdrop. The Black experience of Vietnam as a as a backdrop. Um, so because this way you're like normalizing the experience of that being in a movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this is an acceptable backdrop for movies, and we should learn more about it. You know what I mean? And have it be more of the experience, because it was like a huge part, especially of Vietnam. Like obviously there was a lot of Black soldiers who served in the Second World War in Korea, but Vietnam was very distinctively poor people getting drafted. And at the time in the United States, unfortunately it was disproportionately people of color. And I thought he was able to do that, and what it allows him to do is it creates a canvas for him to paint genre on top of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that he does that, because I love The Inside Man, right? But for me, it's like not a Spike Lee movie. It's not like
Mm,
it's missing the listen. I enjoy it, and it's great, and the performances are fantastic, and Denzel is just killing it on screen. Clive Owen's fantastic, but it doesn't have that context. That it's his most Hollywood movie, I think, and it doesn't
Yeah,
have that.
easily.
It doesn't.
yeah,
It does.
100%.
It doesn't have the context of the rest of his films, where it's almost like I missed it. It's like, yo, I wanted that, Spike. That was good.
But I feel like, and that's kind of, I'm not too sure that old boy come after Inside Man.
Oh, I don't talk about
Yes.
Spike Lee's Old Boy.
Yeah. We don't
we
talk
don't
about
talk.
Spike Lee's Old
We
Boy,
don't
but
talk.
yes.
We don't talk about. Okay, but the film that we may not mention, I think that was right after that. So there's a that projection of like, okay, let me try to get some more of the studio cash, because Inside Man, I don't know how much of the box office was, but it was an extremely talked about film.
Yeah.
So I think like because he tailored it more in like a traditional sort of blockbuster structure,
Mm.
it shot him in the foot.
Yeah. I like
Like
it's
Inside Man was great, but everything after, because he went that trajectory.
yeah, like the Old Boy. First of all, we didn't need to remake which is now the Voldemort of this podcast, the fucking the Spike Lee Old Boy, because the original is so intensely amazing.
uh,
You know that that educational impetus, it goes back to the PBS thing. Like that's I want that. I want that.
yeah,
I want that feeling from Spike Lee, because it makes him super unique. It's one of the things that means, like, if you want what Spike Lee is serving, you're not getting it anywhere else.
yeah.
And
It's like poetic Ken Burns.
yeah, it's Ken Burns without the passing out. Like listen. I love Ken Burns, but like if I'm
Hey,
watching,
chill on the Ken Burns slander,
no,
yo.
no,
Chill on the-
I am absolutely pro Ken Burns. It's just like have to be lucid when I watch it,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
right? I
Yeah.
can't be like a blunt in, or like
Absolutely not.
watching the movie, watching baseball,
Yeah.
watching episode 7 of Baseball, like,
Yeah.
right? And even his documentaries, like I was with you on the When the Levees Broke. That documentary is chilling.
Oh my
Every
God.
minute of it, just his ability to put it together, and it's awesome because his visual style is continual through documentary and through his drama
Yeah,
and
I
the way he
think.
puts it together, right?
Yeah, I just watched Four Little Girls
Oh, another
last
great
week,
one.
and
Yeah,
Heartbreaking,
yeah.
heartbreaking.
completely heartbreaking. But like, it just like, yeah, like you said, it just continues his visual style, and it like he just shines through, and it's like, you can tell it's Spike Lee across genres. It's not like he's going into this like documentary style to make a documentary. It's like it's a documentary, but it's still like a Spike Lee joint. It's
Yeah,
still like it's still film.
There's branding, and he's smart to
Yeah,
do it like that.
yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, Four Little Girls. There's two documentaries that have made me like cry right away. That's one of them. And there's this documentary called White Light Black Rain. It was about the Hiroshima bombing, and it was just talking about like the civilian impact on it, and it just was just heart wrenching to watch. And I just think that he did it in such a way that was so like perfect for the material. Like it wasn't heavy handed. Like he didn't have to inject things into it. He just really told the story and contextualized it and what its impact on America and the civil rights movement was. And I think that's what's really great about him. I would love to see other black filmmakers do this because
Yeah.
this is interesting because this shit gets left out as part of history. It just gets funneled in under black history when there's no alternate reality. It's fucking the same history. And especially with Vietnam, because like Vietnam in the context of of American history, and especially 20th century American history, it's not enough up until really recently. It was really washed out in terms of its context in the civil rights era, and I like that this level of storytelling with it, that's kind of combining it and showing the contextualization with the civil rights movement. And I think his films are incredible, and I think that this is just another one. But yeah, as again, his docs, When the Levee Broke was absolutely incredible.
So good. So,
Uh,
so good.
yeah. So I guess the kind of questions to kind of sum all of this up, I have two. One, can Spike Lee do a war movie? And two, where does this stand in the pantheon of Spike Lee movies?
like to the first question, I think is like, yes, he can do a war movie, because I think even like looking back at Miracle at St. Anna, it has one of my favorite war like shots in like any movie. I think when the American soldiers are about to fire on the black soldiers because they can't believe they gotten that far, and they're like kind of taking fire from the German soldiers at the same time, and it leaves like a lot of them dead. I thought like that was like a really fantastic shot, really
Mm,
fantastic scene, and it also like spoke to the experience of black soldiers in that like they were fighting a war on two fronts. You
mm,
know,
yeah.
I think this film didn't have as many great like war shots, and I think like it almost speaks to kind of what you're saying before. Like this film was like maybe at its heart like a western kind of set in
Yeah.
Vietnam.
It's like the backdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't play as big a role. So I don't know. I think it might be hard to even just think about now, like call it like as much of a war movie. It's more like a friendship movie, like
An adventure movie.
a adventure movie, like a father son movie. Like there's a lot of different elements
Yeah.
to this movie.
Yeah. And I mean, to your question about can Spike Lee make a war movie? And I think the answer is a resounding yes. Uh, I think he was, like I mentioned earlier, he's a very poetic filmmaker, and maybe people's like idea of war is gritty, like shaky camera, Saving
Mm,
Private Ryan, but
yeah.
you know, Thin Red Line. I mean, Terrence Malick has to be one of the most poetic filmmakers out there. I mean, with his shots of like nature for half the films he makes, and Thin Red
Tree of
Line was a
Life.
yeah, exactly. And for me, I mean, Thin Red Line like is such a great war film, because it captures so many different elements of, without just being about, oh shit was bad over there. So because of Spike Lee's style, I don't know if he's hit it home yet. I like Miracle Saint Anna, but I think like if it really put his energy, like if he went full tilt, I think we can see an amazing war film. Because like to Covern's point, I think this is a Five Bloods is a war backdrop
Yeah.
of a dramatic film of characters. In the place of where it is amongst all other films, that's tough. I like this more than Black Klansman. I think it's in the area of his newer films. I don't even want to even try to have comparisons of his like gold-plated work from his past. But I did like this more than Black Klansman. I don't know if it's a better film. I just personally liked it more, and I think it's better than the Chiracs of the world, even the sweet blood of Jesus. You know, I think this is probably, with comparison to Black Klansman, his best work after his, the film that we don't talk about, period.
Yeah, I think this is. You can do a war film. I think he has his ability to take the chops and and all the influence and interpret that into his own stories, because some people are just regurgitating, right, whereas he is like injecting things into it. That's where you get into the Dirty Dozen type, caper or heist element to it, where there's people are being wise guys and talking shit to each other, but then it's wrapped in this idea of, it's not so much about the Vietnam War, the Black experience in the Vietnam War, it's about the Black experience after the Vietnam War and what are the psychological problems that people are going through. And I think his ability to handle that, first of all, of any kind of film genre, I think this film handles that particularly well. So, I mean, in terms of like where it sits, I mean, if you're looking at his pantheon, I think his most enduring work is obviously going to be Do the Right Thing. I think his best narrative work in terms of his ability to tell stories through characters is Malcolm X. Because I think he's able in that film to really encapsulate how dynamic, Malcolm X was in terms of his political leanings, because he went from a criminal to, ardent supportive Nation of Islam to understanding that, like, that all people can be inherently good, and showing that like progression, which is kind of really upholds the work that of the autobiography, and Alex Haley. And I think that he's able. I think that Malcolm X is his best film from a filmmaking standpoint. I mean, when you're looking at after that, like, it's hard because, like things like Crooklyn, these films are so ingrained into, like, even like Mo Better Blues. Like, I've seen that fucking million. I've seen it a million times. Yeah, I've seen it like a million times, and I love it. And I feel like when I was, a teenager, I watched these movies so much. And Clockers, I friggin' love Clockers.
Jungle Fever.
Jungle Fever is good. How good is friggin' Samuel L. Jackson in that movie?
Oh, it was amazing.
Even Bamboozled, like I feel like even that, like it's in its own, like, that's why it's like it's a gold.
It doesn't get enough love though.
No, it doesn't.
I know. I was like tweeting stuff the other day, like I think today actually, about like just some clips and how like his approach is satirical material, like so I think he tried it with Chirac again, and it was like, ugh.
No, he just missed it. He missed the mark. Yeah.
But I know he was like, ooh, I could do it with Bamboozled. Let me try it with like black men getting killed at an alarming rate in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like, no, that's actually like kind of a tragedy that's unfolding as we speak right now.
Like,
I think it's because, what it is, because he's a funny guy. Like, Spike Lee is a fucking joker. Like, this guy's getting threatened. Like, he's getting choke signs from Reggie Miller at the Gardens. So like, this guy is obviously funny, and he has, and there's a lot of duality to his personality, where he's this like revolutionary figure, but at the same time, he's not like, he has pride in himself, but he doesn't take himself too seriously sometimes as well. So it's hard to balance those ideas. Like for example, like the tragedy that's going on the south side of Chicago. And like, I didn't find Chirac anything particularly amusing about it. because especially I lived just fucking south of Chicago for a few years, and it's fucking sad, man. Like, so I was a little bit more like, this is no good. But where this movie, I thought he was able to do it because it's in the context of like a bunch of old guys who've known each other for a long time, and there's some things that endure through the tragedy. You know what I mean? Like the ability to at least like enjoy each other's company for a few seconds. So I think he does really well with this. It's just like films like Crooklyn and and Clockers are like ingrained into my like film preferences. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
love it. So it's hard for me. I think for any career that his can be compared to, the most accurate one is Martin Scorsese. Because
Mhm.
okay, so Martin Scorsese's got his, he's got his fucking Raging Bull, he's got his Goodfellas and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Spike Lee has his Malcolm X, he has his Do the Right Thing. But then what
Sure.
about After Hours? After Hours is fucking amazing, but not a lot of people have watched it. I feel this way about some of Spike Lee's films that, like Mo Better
Mhm.
Blues. Not a ton of people have watched that movie. That movie's awesome. So, like, his ability to even create these, like, gems that don't get noticed as much is really awesome. And I think that you can, like, for anybody, like, I almost envy, like, like a film student just getting into Spike Lee because you're
Yeah.
about to go see a whole world of shit.
25th Hour, I think, is so underrated. Like
It's
for me,
so
with
good.
with
It's
Spike Lee,
great
I'd
film.
probably like have to break him into like 3 periods, and like you kind of like go
Yes.
that early like Jungle Fever, Malcolm X like
Yeah.
period up to like Clockers, and then like maybe the next period I'd go maybe to like the early 2000s with like He Got Game, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I guess He Got Game, Bamboozled, 25th Hour. Yeah,
And then
that's
like you kind
insane.
of
Yeah.
get into this third era. So I think in the third era, like this film is like really strong and like like completely blows like some of the other
I
movies I won't talk about out of the water. But
I
25th
honestly think
Hour's
there's like five eras. I was like
yeah,
counting it in my head, like
Yeah, no. I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true because you have the original ones like She's Gotta Have It, School Days,
yeah.
and Do the Right Thing. I think that's like one period. I think that's his like heavily independent period. That's the formative period where he's like trying to hustle and make it happen. Whereas Malcolm X, I think, is the beginning of the big films that he's doing. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Where he's talking about cinema on a larger scale than the
So
independent things.
you would put Malcolm X around the time if He Got Game?
Would I put I think He Got Game was 96.
96, yeah, 98.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess like yeah. So it's like Malcolm X started that era.
It was like 90.
Yeah,
Was
I mean,
Malcolm X like 93 or 94? I'm trying
yeah.
to.
Malcolm X 92. So then he
92.
kind of
Sorry, yeah.
goes on a Crooklyn run 94, and then Clockers 95, and then like I would say like kind of wraps up with He Got Game in 98
right.
or Summer
Okay,
of
okay,
Sam
okay.
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, He Got Game. I think it's a particularly mainstream movie. Just
Yeah.
well, at least the attempt was for that. I mean, obviously the 3-point game is excellent in He Got Game because we got the incomparable Ray Allen.
Yeah.
Was this after? This was Ray Allen, I believe, was drafted in '96. Was that post draft Ray Allen?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
he just been like he was like the
That's so crazy.
Yeah, I was like, this is awesome because I was
and
like,
he does really well, like for like, an athlete.
Oh my god, like so good.
he's good in it. He's not like he's
I
not
ac-
shit. He's good.
I actually forgot it was Ray Allen for like a good chunk of time. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh okay, like, and then someone reminded me, and I was like, and I think it was when he was like Boston Celtics Day. So like, it's embarrassingly bad that I didn't even recollect.
I feel like he's. I feel, it's. I find it. He was so good. It's like hard to separate him from the character. I see his interviews, and I'm like, yo, man, this guy's gonna get shit. Denzel's gonna be hugging this guy's grave. And I think 25th Hour is a really good example. And Summer of Sam, like I know what, I haven't seen that movie in forever, and now I totally want to revisit it. It makes sense that he's the one who made that film because I mean it obviously required a New York director in order to handle the subject matter properly and to really kind of
Mhm.
understand how its effect on the city and like the Son of Sam killings. What do we think of Summer of Sam? Like, do we like it? Do we?
I probably haven't seen it since like 2002, so I'd have to give it a rewatch. But I love John Leguizamo like in it, and Adrian Brody.
They're so good.
They're really
Yeah, I haven't watched it in like an extremely long time.
It's the one I think I've
I
seen
think-
the least, to be honest with you, other than Chirac,
I
which
think-
was on purpose.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I gotta revisit it.
I think it was like a weird era too, because it was like that was when I was renting movies in Blockbuster if I wanted to see a movie. So like if I didn't own it on DVD or like go to Blockbuster or the library, like I wasn't like able to like rewatch movies a bunch of times. So I think a lot of movies that kind of like got lost in that shuffle.
Like this is for me is one of his better movies. That's
Oh
for
yeah,
sure. I think
that's
the only
it.
reason it wouldn't crack like the top 3 or 5 is just because there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, I would put it safely in his top 10 though.
100%. Yes, I would too.
Top 10. Let's see.
Anyways,
Agreed. Yeah, I'm there too.
on that note of agreement, gentlemen, I believe we gotta get going. So Coburn, Neil, thank you so much for doing this. I had a great time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great talking.
Yeah, no, this was a great time. Thanks for having me.